The White Goat Wilderness is a stunning landscape sitting along the eastern boundary of Banff National Park, east of Highway 93, and the southern boundary of Jasper National Park along the Brazeau River. This relatively small chunk of the Rockies is bounded on its east and south sides entirely by the massive Bighorn backcountry, a much larger area made up of 6 public land use zones with much less protections, unfortunately. The White Goat Wilderness used to be much larger, but was reduced from over 1,266 square kilometers in 1961 to only 445 square kilometers in 1973, removing the Job and Coral Creek valleys. According to the Alberta Wilderness Association, the White Goat is just one of 3 wilderness areas in the Rockies, sharing this distinction with the Ghost River and Siffler wilderness areas. These are among the most protected lands in all of Canada. The wilderness areas are protected by legislation prohibiting entry by vehicles, aircraft, and horseback. Its wildlife is protected by bans on hunting, fishing, and trapping. Access is by foot only, and once there you're on your own, with no signage and very few trails to assist your travels. The stated purpose of the wilderness areas is to preserve in perpetuity natural mountain landscapes while providing opportunities for present and future generations to experience wilderness. My personal experiences in these landscapes only makes me fervently wish they were much larger and there were many more of them. After completing my first trip into the White Goat Wilderness area in 2015 with Eric Coldhart, I was eager to return. Finally, in mid-August 2022, I was back, this time with Sarah McLean, hoping for a grand peak-bagging tour of the core wilderness area. We left the Nigel Pass parking lot, hiking up the trail to Nigel Pass before branching up the scenic upper Brazeau River to Cataract Pass. After dropping down at Cataract Creek, we continued, off trail now, to Klein Pass before ascending loose slopes to the south ridge of Mount Willis. We crossed a stunning upper afternoon plateau before ascending horribly loose south slopes to the summit of Afternoon Peak. We set up camp and settled in for a quiet evening under the peak. After a long drive up Highway 93 to the Nigel Pass trailhead, we organized our gear one last time, shrugged into our large overnight packs, and shuffled slowly off down the approach road along Nigel Creek. It took less than 2 hours to hike the less than exciting 8 kilometers to Nigel Pass, and from there the magic began, just as I remembered from 2015. Hiking alongside the upper Brazeau River to Cataract Pass was once again a stunning experience. The landscape here is so unexpected and different from other areas of the Rockies. The river is a calm, murky, greenish-blue color, snaking through a shattered landscape with a winding route over rock gardens, flowering meadows, and orange-colored slabs.
Isn't it interesting?
Like, look at that. Look at that little rock peninsula.
I know. It's usually just crumbled into total shale. Staged photos of tents with the front door open. Huh. Nice. We'll send a message if we have to.
Someone else decided to put these aftermarket things on it.
Okay. I'm just waiting to get a little bit closer to the running water. I think so. I just checked on my phone.
As we ascended the trail to Cataract Pass on the border between Jasper National Park and the White Goat Wilderness, views over a couple of alpine lakes at the head of the Brazeau River opened up below. Cresting Cataract Pass, we briefly read the self-registration book and signs before continuing into the wild.
Could be goats though.
I don't see them yet.
Yeah, I remember this being somewhat obscured. Not that it really matters, but
Just thinking.
We crossed the shallow creek where Eric and I had set up our 2-night camp in 2015 and continued towards Klein Pass. At this point, we left any semblance of a trail for the next 1.5 days. We were now officially hiking through untrailed wilderness. I had a good idea what to expect from the ascent of Willis's southeast shoulder, and we got it. Lots of rubble and huge shifting rocks. Erg.
look at that, hey? Isn't that magical?
Within 5.5 hours of the trailhead and around 18.5 kilometers into our trip, we got our first stunning views over the Afternoon Lakes Plateau, and we were both suitably impressed. Afternoon Peak looked stunning in its red and purple hues as we began our descent into the Afternoon Lakes Plateau. I had spent quite some time planning a feasible route on Afternoon and still wasn't convinced where the darn summit was. The fact that most maps label the incorrect summit didn't help with the planning. The landscape was just as scenic along the plateau as I'd expected. It was also more work to walk through than I thought it would be. We noted there's no way the valley is made up of karst pavement, but rather quartzite. This didn't really affect the navigation, but the fact that there were so many tarns and lakes to work our way around did. Limestone would have drained many of these water bodies, whereas quartzite did not. The landscape was so unique to the Rockies that we forgot all about the inconveniences and focused on how lovely and fun this was.
Weird. Oh, really? Yeah, it's not bad.
As we crested a last high point with direct views of the valley below, we breathed a huge sigh of relief. The route would definitely go. The views over the valley south of Afternoon Peak were even more stunning than the ones we'd already been enjoying. We descended ledges, slabs, and rubble until finally we bottomed out at a red stream draining Afternoon Peak, and more incredible views.
Satellite map, it pops up.
Oh, definitely.
All the colored lakes.
Yep.
So we can adjust for that.
After spending almost 8 hours and 22.5 kilometers approaching the lower southeast slopes of Afternoon Peak via Nigel Pass, Cataract Pass, and the Afternoon Lakes Plateau, Sarah and I weren't sure about ascending the peak. It's not that we didn't want to ascend it or didn't have the energy to ascend it, it was simply that we weren't 100% sure where the heck it was. As we shouldered our light day packs and donned helmets for the steep ascent, we noted how high a couple of outlier peaks looked compared to the one I'd marked as our objective. Should we trust Gaia's contours? We didn't have much choice at this point, did we? The clouds were moving in as we contoured up lower southeast rubble slopes to one of 3 candidate gullies on the south face of the lofty peak. We targeted the most viable looking shallow gully and started a long traverse on horribly loose rubble slopes.
Oh, I know. Totally screwed.
As we struggled into the bottom of the south gully, we realized just how terribly loose this freaking red giant was. I've seen many loose slopes over the past 2 decades of scrambling in the Rockies, and I can assure you that Afternoon Peak is some of the very finest you'll find anywhere. There was something strange going on with our peak. I still don't know what the heck it is about this particular mountain, but the gully was extremely foreshortened, as was the peak itself. We kept asking ourselves if we were in the right gully on the right peak. We stuck to more moderate scrambling terrain on climbers left of the gully, taking interesting lines up steep ledges and small cliffs.
Some rain.
Yeah.
Well, we still got a ways to go, but easy at least.
It took us over 2 hours to ascend the peak from directly under it, but the views once we finally reached the summit were completely worth the effort. We were the only other party to sign since Liam Harrop's 2016 register. Not a huge surprise given the location and demeanor of this peak.
Yes. Good job.
On descent, we chose a more direct line in the middle of the gully to take advantage of the terrain. It worked, but it wasn't the safest thing I've done this year. We started rock slides that kicked rocks on us from many meters above and slid for 30 seconds into the gully below as a river of scree and rocks.
Careful, Sarah, there's a few rocks coming. Woohoo! Those are the ones you don't like. I wouldn't even want to be on here with 3. That was a big one. Okay. Yeah, let's get this whole mess going.
After a very loose and tiring 3.5-hour round trip of afternoon peak, we lacked energy to do any more backpacking. We wandered slightly downstream to find a flat area and set up camp under the southeast ridge of afternoon peak on soft alpine meadows near the red-colored outflow stream. What a first day! It was already feeling like one of those epic trips that lives on in memory banks for years to come. The views were overwhelming. Some days are like this, but rarely do whole trips come together like this one seemed to be. In another display of just how perfectly this trip was coming together, we got some sprinkles of rain just as we entered our tents. Talk about perfect timing. On our second day in the White Goat Wilderness, Sarah and I descended the expansive afternoon plateau and navigated tricky terrain downstream towards McDonald Creek. From the valley bottom, we ascended south slopes of Mount Francis before returning to our packs and contouring into the McDonald Creek Valley. Surprisingly, we found a faint trail leading through forested terrain before losing it and making progress up McDonald Creek to our chosen campsite for the night. From our site near the creek, we ascended Lonely Peak via a scenic west-northwest gully to lofty south scree slopes high above. Views from this peak were stunning, and we descended our ascent route in fading light before enjoying another quiet evening at camp. We woke at 0600 on Wednesday, August 17th, ready for another day in paradise in the White Goat Wilderness area.
And then the fingertip feels sharp, like it's gonna explode.
That's not great.
Yeah, and then it just makes everything, like for me, it was that from summer training,
Oh yeah.
like going from only skiing to then doing a whole bunch of bureaucratic
Which is probably a good
to get
thing.
through that. Yeah.
As we slowly descended off the plateau into the main valley, we noticed a similar theme to the day before when we first entered the area. Although very scenic, this type of landscape can be a lot of work to navigate blindly. Every lake meant walking around it on loose or undulating terrain. Every patch of forest was thick and difficult to push directly through. After a short but fierce bushwhack, we encountered our first proper lake. We decided to hike around its rocky shore rather than the bushy one. This was wilderness travel at its very best.
Wowzers. Huh. Pretty cool.
I've bushwhacked and streamwhacked and been way off trail in the Rockies many times, but in this case we were really out there. There wasn't even the hint of a trail or a track through the convoluted terrain. I'm sure we didn't take the best line off the plateau into the lower treed valley, but we managed to get there within an hour and a half.
Looks good too. Wow.
We encountered more incredible views as we topped out on another sparkling green lake along the stream. This time we faced bushwhacking no matter which way we went. Over the past 1.5 hours, Mount Francis had slowly been growing larger and larger as we approached it and descended down valley. There wasn't a choice but to get wet feet, and we crossed the creek dozens of times on our way towards Francis Peak. Once again, the strategy of hiking with wet shoes saved many hours of time as we marched relentlessly down the clearest edges of the creek. By around 11 o'clock, we were south of the slopes I'd marked for ascent on Mount Francis and started towards it with our light day packs. After a short but fierce willow whack to pine forest on Francis' lower south-facing slopes, we ascended easily into a rocky drainage on its south face. The sun was stiflingly hot by the time we were struggling up hardpack scree on the upper southeast ridge to the summit. The ascent only took us an hour and a half from the stream below.
Francis Peak.
We were the third to sign the register since Collier and Jones placed it in 2011.
Big pink box.
Of course.
I've heard of. I think he does a lot. Like
Okay.
I think he lives around here.
Did they say where they accessed it from?
No. Like, I feel like he's the guy that someone wrote. Did a scrambling.
After a short and light bushwhack, our day improved dramatically with a flagging and a hint of a hiking trail leading up forested slopes high above McDonald Creek. The trail was most welcome and was an excellent mental break. It didn't last long, but soon we broke out of the forest to a rock meadow below the northeast face of Francis, which we easily followed to willows and meadows in the McDonald Creek Valley between Mount Francis and Lonely Peak. From here we spotted our planned bivvy near the creek and headed across the valley. We'd already had quite the day as we slowly started out from our camp along McDonald Creek. We'd been up and at it for 9 hours already.
Both look like they would probably go.
We started up the west-northwest drainage on fun slabs to climbers left before transitioning into the stream bed on a mix of rubble, slab, and scree.
So that the passage comes down the field.
Water was certainly not going to be an issue on Lonely Peak. We were literally walking in a flowing stream for a good part of the ascent of the gully. Once again, we had to trust that Gaia had the correct high point, as outliers looming to the south of the peak looked very high. The thought that we had to ascend even higher was a bit too much to think about, so I didn't. As I finally gained the edge of a shallow ridge under the summit, I was blown away by the stupendous views east into the headwater areas of Job and Coral Creeks. Once again, we were a rare ascent. Only 2 other entries in the register, one from the Grizzly Group in 2006 and the other from Rick Collier in 2011.
Oh boy. Wow. Lonely Peak.
As we were taking in the amazing evening views from our lofty perch, Sarah somehow noticed 3 colorful tents on an alpine plateau northwest of Job Lake.
Just keep going.
As I retired to my tent for the evening, I pondered on our big day, exiting the Afternoon Creek Valley, ascending Mount Francis and Lonely Peak, en route finding our way through kilometers of untracked and untrailed mountain landscapes. Mentally, I wondered how far we could push things the following day. Pretty far, as it turns out. On our third day, we ascended McDonald Creek to its stunning headwater lake and further to the summit of its namesake mountain. We descended to McDonald Lake and enjoyed its beauty before returning to our packs and hiking further upstream into the lovely afternoon alpine meadows towards Oval Peak. It was a scorching hot day as we ascended Oval with a wildfire plume billowing to the west over afternoon. We returned to our packs, and as the day grew late, we descended to the Brazeau River. A series of decisions resulted in a long, exhausting hike all the way back through several campgrounds along the Brazeau River and South Boundary Trail before finally giving up and deciding to hike all the way out. We continued up to Nigel Pass and completed one of my longest days in the mountains, exiting all the way to the trailhead. We completed our trip just before midnight for a total of 106 kilometers of hiking and scrambling over 3 incredible days with over 5,800 meters of total height gain on 5 remote peaks. We were up once again around 0600 on Thursday and moving by 0700, headed for Mount McDonald. After walking 3 kilometers up the creek, we once again dropped the overnight packs, shrugged into light day packs, and went exploring on an obscure summit that few have ever heard of, much less desired to visit. My favorite kind of peak.
Five, I think, if the map is right.
Like from the lake or from here?
From the lake.
Yeah.
As the sun rose in the east, we arrived at an unexpected alpine bowl beneath an outlier of McDonald, under a ring of cliffs and a small waterfall. After skirting the waterfall cliffs, I had a hunch that if we followed ledges and scree slopes directly towards the still distant peak, we could shortcut to it directly from the southeast. My hunch was bang on. The sun was cooking once again as we ascended the final few hundred vertical meters up easy south scree slopes to the lofty 3,151 meter summit of Mount McDonald. There were 7 other entries in the summit registers since the Jasper Warden placed it in 1996. Most wrote long entries for some reason. I guess it's that sort of peak. It was already 12:30 when we returned and started hiking up towards the distant afternoon alpine meadows north of Mount Francis. The overnight packs felt heavy as we sweated and swore our way towards the north end of Mount Francis. The bushwhacking wasn't terrible, but the willows sure weren't pleasant either. I had Ephraim Roberts' GPS track from his ascent of Mount Francis North Ridge, and we angled towards it in order to get on a good line to the north shoulder of Oval Peak. This resulted in some seriously nasty willow whacking and more sweating and swearing. It's not all unicorns and rainbows hiking for days off trail, folks. Finally, we pushed through the last of problematic willows and started another fantastic hike through high alpine meadows towards the distant Oval Peak. As we ascended the north shoulder of Oval, we decided to take our time tagging this small peak. At this point, we were planning another camp, and we thought we had plenty of time as it was only around 3 in the afternoon. Sarah chilled at the summit in a light breeze while I explored the plateau towards Afternoon Peak's incredible north face. We were surprised to find that 2 other people had already filled in their names at Oval Peak's register since Ephraim Roberts placed it back in mid-July, one of them only a few days before us. After taking 45 minutes on the summit of Oval, we decided that it was prudent to start heading down to our waiting overnight packs and make the long descent to the South Boundary Trail, still far below. Grateful to have Ephraim's GPS track, we ambled slowly down steep scree and grass slopes into a drainage northwest of Oval Peak. Following the track and the odd sheep trail, we got easily down a tree line. It was a highlight moment when we finally stumbled on a horse trail leading south to the large bridge we'd spotted from Oval Peak. It was very quickly a low-light moment when we lost the old trail about 200 meters before the bridge over the Brazeau River and ended up in a thick swamp with a billion mosquitoes fighting for our blood. It was now 7 o'clock at night and the sun was already getting low in the sky as we crossed the bridge to join the South Boundary Trail. We'd hiked almost 30 kilometers already, all of it off trail. There was no place to set up a camp near the bridge, so we decided to put on bug spray and march 4.5 kilometers up the South Boundary Trail to the 4-point campground and hope for a couple of open tent sites. I had reservations about crashing an official campsite, but what choice did we have at this point? There were 2 open sites at 4 Point, but I made it clear that I wasn't comfortable staying in either one of them. After discussing it and getting some honest opinions, we realized that if it were up to me, we would complete the hike to the parking lot today rather than camp illegally. I really don't like the idea of someone with a reservation coming late to a campground only to find a jerk like me in their spot. As we marched past the Boulder Creek camp, we encountered a surprised camper holding a birthday cake for her partner. Boy, did that cake look good. I almost grabbed a piece. We took our last break at the bridge over the Brazeau River just past the Boulder Creek campground as the sun set over Nigel Pass and the surrounding peaks. It was now 9 o'clock and we were sore. Damn sore. Having never hiked up Nigel Pass from the Boulder Creek side before, it was a hell of a grunt. We gained hundreds of meters with big packs digging into our shoulders and our feet screaming protest at the additional abuse we were subjecting them to. A few times I had to stop and breathe through the pain in my toes. I could feel the skin tearing off of them. Sarah had already been suffering for hours with very sore feet and suffered on in silence. Headlamps came on as we worked our way up the pass and the evening became night. Finally, at 2200 hours, we crested the pass and joined with our approach track. I'm not going to sugarcoat the last few hours to the trailhead. They were freaking tough. We both had to dig very deep to continue onwards in the dark, 1 foot in front of the other for kilometer after kilometer on a hard pack and uneven trail. Finally, just before midnight, we stumbled into the parking lot 17 hours and 49 kilometers from our bivvy along McDonald Creek. I highly recommend this area for experienced mountain trekkers, but I do recommend taking a few more days to do it than we did if you can.